Chapter 2: Innovation versus Duplication. Great leaders always innovate. They don't duplicate. I'll never forget how shocked I was when one of my best leaders decided to leave our company and start his own venture. It wasn't his decision to sell his downline that disturbed me. Lives change and people move on. It was the statements he made about me while attempting to recruit distributors into his new deal. He said that essentially he was the main reason I had succeeded and that 70% of my entire downline was under him. The reason it bothered me was that he was right. Not only was he correct about that, but he even went further to suggest that he had never even duplicated my system. He claimed he had done it all his own way. Again, it disturbed me because he was absolutely right. The closer I examined my organization, the more I noticed that every real leader had his or her own system. Of course, he never disclosed the fact that one couple on his front line accounted for over 70% of his volume, and that this couple had never duplicated anything he or I had taught them. No one in that entire leg of my downline had more than one really strong downline organization. That's the way MLM works. In fact, that's ironically the biggest complaint about binary compensation plans. All you need in a binary is two frontline people, but the trick in some companies is to have them balanced and successful. I hear people in binaries complaining that most of their volume is coming from one runaway leg. Most people can't even build two strong legs, a fact which occurred years ago to analytical corporate types who then set up money games that looked simple because they only required two legs. More on that later, but now back to my story. What disturbed me most, the closer I examined my organization, was that every real leader had his or her own system. In fact, so did I. Against the protests of my best upline leaders, I began running ads in the sales section of my local newspaper. It was those ads that pulled most distributors. The only structure I followed was really not a system at all. Richard Call said, "Get 20 customers before you start recruiting." I did. Then he said, "Go wide fast. If you don't recruit one new frontline each day, you're failing." So I made it a point to get one distributor each day, whatever it took. And finally he taught me that the lifeblood of your organization is the new blood. Consequently, I spent my time looking for new distributors rather than attempting to manage or motivate those who had already signed up. Those were the principles Richard taught me, and I'll always consider him a genius. The systems to implement them, I invented. And not only did I invent my own recruiting strategies, but so did my best downline leaders in spite of my duplication battlecry. Two truths of MLM. There are two fundamental truths in MLM, which most legends are willing to admit privately, but bristle in public. First, nobody is really a legendary dynamo singularly responsible for building a huge group. It's a team effort, and those of us who work really hard will eventually blunder into one or two other people who work really hard, and so on. Second, nobody ever really duplicates anybody else. Each of us brings our own unique personality, competence, ethics, and work habits to the table. A great leader will provide certain objectives like 2 retail customers a month or 1 new distributor a day to new recruits, and to help those new distributors develop a set of strategies that best fits their personal abilities. My best year in network marketing began with the realization that I never again need to be angry with other leaders in my organization for refusing to duplicate my system. For years, there were undercurrents of anger, backbiting, and frustration in my organization. And I'm sorry to say that much of it began at the top. That's right, I was the culprit. After all, I had built a dynasty, so how dare anyone challenge my authority? I entered into childish gossip with people who called me to tattle on their uplines for not duplicating my system. Some of my more daring leaders actually had the audacity to create their own audio tapes instead of using mine. And horror of horrors, some of their sales aids were better than mine. My whole life was about putting out bushfires and arguing with entrepreneurs who dared to ignore the mighty Yarnell system. General Manager of the Universe. Everything in life became much more easier for me the year I decided to resign as General Manager of the Universe. It all happened in the most unlikely manner. It was 1992, and I had just accepted an opportunity as a regular contributing editor for Success magazine. My objective was to interview various legends and write articles about how they had built huge organizations. I had received the unprecedented invitation to sit in on an advanced training session of one of our industry's top distributors in America's undisputed king of MLM companies. It was unprecedented for me to be there because not even leaders from other organizations within that same company were granted admission. I was an outsider. When I got to the door of the huge banquet hall, I went through a security clearance worthy of a participant in a US presidential Pentagon meeting. Men with walkie-talkies communicated my name back and forth until a backstage security leader received permission from the legend himself to admit me. I entered a banquet hall with some 5,000 cheering participants and was escorted to the VIP seating area near the front. 30 minutes later than the planned start time, the lights dimmed and an overweight 50-ish guy ran onto the stage to applause so thunderous I feared a possible building collapse. I actually found myself getting sucked into the mass hysteria, clapping as if I was in an Elvis Returns concert. For the next several hours, I watched intently and even took notes as the legend railed about the moral decay in America. From Madonna to Michael Jackson, the speaker attacked numerous celebrities and what he viewed as their blatant efforts to bring America to its moral knees. After criticizing artists, he spent a couple of hours attacking left-wing politicians and about an hour in what could only be considered a Christian altar call. The final hour was supposed to be an actual demonstration of how to conduct an in-home presentation. He selected 2 eager kids to come up on stage and play the roles of a married couple. For some curious reason, he picked 2 young men and asked one to portray a woman. After their giddiness subsided, obviously the result of being so close to the man, they began to answer each of his questions as if it was scripted. No objections, just 2 supposedly critical thinking young people who salivated at the prospect of joining the company. The mock presentation lasted an hour and a half, during which time the legend did little more than crack impromptu witticisms, none of them which were remotely funny, to the squeals and laughter of a step-forward audience. When the advanced training was over, I had absolutely nothing of substance to report in my Success magazine article. However, I was whisked away in a caravan of limos to the airport and told that I would perhaps have 5 precious minutes alone with the legend before he left his flight to Dallas. None of the leaders had ever duplicated anything they had learned from their legendary upline. Our meeting never transpired. Such a huge crowd had assembled at the departure gate that no one except his top leaders could get within 10 feet of him. As we waved goodbye and his plane pushed back from the terminal, I walked past a bar in which I noticed 3 or 4 of his inner circle who had assembled fugitively in a back corner over beers and Bloody Marys. After explaining to them who I was and that I was there to write an article for the Success magazine about their organization, they invited me to join them. For the next couple of hours, as the alcohol lowered their walls of resistance, I learned the truth about their company's remarkable success. According to them, the advanced training session I had just attended was called Upline Edification. It had absolutely nothing to do with duplication or education. None of the leaders had ever duplicated anything that they had learned from their legendary upline, nor did any of them have the slightest idea how the people in their upline had actually succeeded. They pointed out that once a person had risen to that guy's level, he had earned the right to be exalted. He is also allowed to create his own audio tapes at a base cost of 25 cents a tape and sell them to his downline for $5 each. No one at the table could offer me an insight into any system which had resulted in such a huge downline beyond the fact that the leader had been in the business for 26 years and had recruited several hundred frontline distributors. Each one of them did, however, offer me their own system for success, none of which even remotely resembled the others. The key, they said, was hard work, loyalty, meeting attendance, tape club membership, and an upline adoration as a moral booster. In the end, I was spared the embarrassment of writing a shallow article when the legend refused to approve of the photograph Success had selected of him. At the time, Success magazine had an editorial policy that the layout people were allowed to select their own spontaneous portraits of their subjects. The legend insisted that he would provide his own portrait, no doubt a leaner, younger version of himself. The editors declined, and the article was never published. Now, I don't believe for 1 minute that we were ever elevating ourselves by denigrating others. My purpose in sharing this is to merely make the point that duplication played no role in the growth of one of our industry's premier organizations. And far be it from me to suggest that a person who has dedicated 26 years of his life to one downline in his company is not worthy of some recognition. He probably deserves a gold medal or a plaque or something for loyalty and perseverance. De-emphasize duplication. What I'm saying is, let's face facts and stop giving legitimacy to the absurd concept of duplication. It's entrepreneurial innovation, not organizational duplication, that works. My best year in network marketing began with the decision to respect other entrepreneurial leaders in my organization for their own unique and innovative talents. The year that I began to acknowledge and applaud each leader's creative system instead of demanding that they follow mine, my income doubled. I would no longer interfere and try to force people to adopt my own techniques. Once I left people to their own techniques, they did just fine. The fact is, some people operate at a different level than others. You have super performers, you have slower performers, and you have every variation in between. It's just human nature. When my company opened in Europe, I went to London to recruit new distributors. Most of the big guns went to Germany, but I didn't want to deal with the language barrier, so I chose England as my next stop. In England, I met an impoverished couple who couldn't afford their own car. Together, we figured out a recruiting strategy that highlighted their talents, and they went to work. Within 6 months, they had risen to the highest level in our company, setting a record for all of Europe, which still hasn't been surpassed. Their system was not one I would have ever been able to duplicate, but it worked for them. Big Al decries duplication. To give credit where credit is due, Tom Schreider tried to teach me the folly of duplication years before I finally figured it out. Known as Big Al to most of the industry, Tom is one of the funniest, most self-depreciating leaders I have ever met. He's truly a legend, and those who haven't heard his tapes or read his materials should do so. His object lesson in the folly of duplication occurred at an upline master seminar during a panel question and answer session in which we both participated back in 1990. Richard Brooke, president of Oxyfresh, and Sandy Ellersberg, industry consultant, were the other two panelists, and it was our job to field and answer questions from the audience. A question about duplication arose, and I began to wax eloquently on the subject. When I had finished a brilliant oration, the same question was put to Big Al. He said, duplication is not quite as important as Yarnell and the others believe, in my opinion. Let's say you're at the doctor's office for a physical exam, and upon leaving you accidentally back your car into a new Mercedes. The irate driver climbs out, and as you're exchanging insurance verification cards, you casually explain that you're involved in network marketing, a field it turns out fortuitously that this person has been considering for several months. One thing leads to another, and 2 weeks later he signs up on your front line and begins building a huge organization. Do you then spend the rest of your career looking for new imports to back into? Everyone laughed, including me. But lost in his humor was a very important fact. There are as many systems as there are successful people in our industry. Some succeed by accident, and others as the result of specific skills. Entrepreneurs are, by their very nature, innovative, creative, and individualistic. One of the biggest fallacies in MLM is that we should attempt to force creative people to use systems which they don't like and often can't copy. People need to prospect a lot of people each week, and they need to find a realistic number of legitimate retail customers. Jeff Pearsall's view on duplication. Jeff Pearsall, once a standout distributor for Excel, decided to change career directions and become a vice president for Relive. Jeff is now president of Legacy for Life. Since he's a good friend, I called him to bounce around some ideas of duplication. I explained my opinions about the subject, but not before asking him to discuss his position on duplication first, so as not to bias him. I didn't want to colour his thinking with my own view, because he was in such an ideal position to share his own, having succeeded both as a distributor and a corporate leader. Without any prompting, Jeff laughed and related the truth about his experience in both companies. He said, "You know, when the top 9 leaders used to meet to discuss our company, the only thing we had in common was that we had each done our own thing. The biggest complaint was that we just couldn't seem to find the people willing to duplicate us. The same thing is true in this company." My biggest concern about writing a chapter like this is that some might misinterpret my opinions about duplication to mean that we need not give new distributors a track on which to run or any sense of structure. That is not true. New people do need a simple step system as a foundation and encouragement to capitalize on their own strengths and innovation. It is imperative that our recruits understand the tremendous amount of work necessary to succeed in our industry. A few cursory rules are always important. People need to prospect a lot of people each week, and they need to find a way to make a realistic number of retail customers. Network marketing, like any other profession, requires a tremendous number of new recruits, and to pretend otherwise is preposterous. Finding 3 or 4 frontline distributors and working with them exclusively until they succeed would be like an NBA team finding a few college basketball players and ceasing all future recruiting. That team would be a bankrupt franchise within a few seasons. Many networkers fail because they can't manufacture MLM legends out of a handful of average performers. So why so much good press on duplication? Before reviewing what does work better than attempting to get everyone to duplicate one system, I have a few words I want to say about why the notion of duplication has received so much positive press. There are several reasons, in my estimation. We leaders have an extremely difficult time believing that anyone can succeed without copying our ingenious methods. Consultants and authors in our industry, many of whom who have never actually built any successful downline, have learned that the best way to obtain consulting contracts and speaking engagements is to pander to those leaders who have the mistaken notion that duplication of their brilliance is the only proper way to do this business. Those who write network marketing books, or have them ghostwritten by what's-his-name, have found that if they glorify duplication, leaders will recommend their books to their downlines. Duplication involves tremendous profits, especially if leaders demand the purchase of tapes and books which they and their family market to loyal downline members. I was in a tiny Mexican village at an open-air vegetable market in the early part of 1995 when I happened upon an amazing scene. Seated on a hand-woven mat in the dusty marketplace was a toothless, 70-something woman with no shoes and tattered clothing. Next to her on the ground was a battery-operated cassette player from which a high-energy lecture was blasting in Spanish. As her middle-aged helper bagged my green onions, I inquired about the tape his elderly friend was so involved in. He involved me that she was a member of a Tape of the Month club in an MLM company, and she was listening to the most recent audio on how to own your own yacht. He rolled his eyes at me conspiratorially as if we both recognized the nature of the folly. I suppose there's no such thing as false hope. As long as people dare to dream, anything is possible. But the notion that an impoverished 70-year-old Mexican vegetable vendor could duplicate a 35-year-old New York lawyer, ultimately owning her own yacht, presumably on a pond somewhere in central Mexico, seemed to me the ultimate example of the absurdity of duplication. Your best year in network marketing can begin today with the simple decision to encourage the unique talents of others. Innovative encouragement. So what's the alternative to duplication? It's innovative encouragement. The key is to help new distributors figure out how to best use their own talents to find retail customers and recruit new distributors. An introvert should not be expected to make 30 face-to-face cold calls a day at the local mall. Neither should an extrovert be encouraged to sit alone using direct mail or web page ads to attract a large downline. Whatever you determined to be a person's personal resources, encourage him or her to exploit them. My number one distributor was Dr. Roy Blizzard. Not only is Roy a tremendous educator, but he is also a much sought after television talk show guest. His ability to appear on national television and discuss a home business in front of 5 million viewers is hardly something that can be easily duplicated as a recruiting strategy. Yet, when he did just that, he received letters from 5,000 prospects and 5% of them eventually got involved. Several of those prospects went on to become legends in our industry by exploiting their own talents, yet not one of them has ever duplicated Dr. Blizzard's TV appearances. Your best year in network marketing can begin today with the simple decision to encourage the unique talents of others. While it may be true that imitation is the highest form of flattery, it's not usually the most profitable of activities. And if it's adulation and praise you crave, rest assured that those in your downline, once wealthy, will pretend that you led them to success, even if you didn't. That's the beauty of MLM. Just like professional athletics, the team does all the work and the coach gets a ring too. Summary. Network marketing is not like buying into a franchise. There is not one specific system or technique that everyone duplicates to achieve success in this business. However, this is not to say there are no parameters or guidelines to follow that greatly increase the chance of success. But there are some facts that usually apply. Every real network marketing leader has his or her own system for building a downline. There is no one person who builds a substantial downline. It is done as a team effort. No one ever duplicates anyone else. We all have our own unique attributes, talents, and personalities that influence how we engage in this business. It's entrepreneurial innovation, not organizational duplication, that works. Duplication gets a lot of good press and support from MLM companies because authors and MLM experts sell more books and tapes if you think you need to duplicate their methods. The secret to network marketing success involves innovative encouragement. In other words, encourage your downline to develop their own method of finding recruits and retail customers. Decide now that you will encourage the unique talents of others on your team.